Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's WilmingtonBiz Talk from the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. I'm Vicki Janowski, editor of the Business Journal, and today we're talking about transportation projects. Joining us for this week's Biz Talk is Chad Kimes, who is the engineer for NCDOT's Division 3, which covers Cape Fear region, and also Mike Kozlosky, who is head of the WMPO, or Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're just going to call it WMPO for the purpose of this talk today. But today we're talking about transportation projects, the big ones that are coming down the pipeline, but also the funding and the funding questions behind those. While we get ready to jump into our discussion, be thinking of questions that you might have, and you can add them into the chat while we're talking on Facebook on the stream, and I'll keep an eye on it and pass those along if we have time to get to them as well. Before we start our discussion, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors, Cape Fear Realtors.
Hello, I'm Ann Gardner, CEO of Cape Fear Realtors. Realtors support this program's efforts to connect our community in meaningful dialogue with actionable insights. Realtors are dedicated professionals who build strong, resilient communities and businesses. Work with someone you can trust. Work with a realtor. Learn more at capefear.realtor.
So thanks for joining us this week on Biz Talk. And like I mentioned a minute ago, we are talking transportation this week. So we have representatives from our area transportation planning organization, as well as the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And just to start us off, as Chad and Mike are jumping on here, just to start us off, let's kind of take a broad look and discuss before we get into specifics. Chad, can you kind of give us an overview on for the projects in your division, particularly in New Hanover, Brunswick, and Pender counties? What are the big ones that are coming up next that people can expect?
So, we have, to start off with, we have a 10-year transportation improvement program. And in those 10 years, you can see the projects that's identified for the next 10 years. But what's coming up immediately, we got some really big news coming up. For one, Hempstead Bypass is probably the biggest priority that we have in this region. The northern section, what we call the B section, is scheduled to let this January. So that will be under construction by February. Very excited about that. That is a major connection that'll connect this whole region from Onslow County, from the Sampson and Duplin counties down to Brunswick County, how it ties into I-140. So very excited about that. Another large project that's actually going to let prior to that, which is this November, that we're excited about. I'm going to dip down into Brunswick County, but 211 is going to let this November, and that project is widening NC 211 from a 2-lane to a 4-lane facility from 87 in Southport to 906 there at Midway Road. So another very large project there.
And Mike, are there any other projects besides those that the WMP board has identified as a priority for your organization?
Yes, the MPO board has identified their top 5 priorities, funded priorities for the region. And those are the Hempstead Bypass, which Chad touched on a minute ago. And we're very, very enthused about the beginning of construction for that project. They've also identified other priorities as the Independence Boulevard extension and 3 interchange projects, one at the Carr Avenue and the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, another at Market, Eastwood, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, and then the other interchange project there at Military Cutoff and Eastwood. They also identified their top unfunded project as the replacement of the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge.
Right, and that's definitely something we're going to talk about in a minute. But before we jump into that and leading into that, really, let's talk money for a minute. So all those projects that you both just mentioned, roadway projects in general, very expensive to undertake. And even when you mentioned the Hempstead Bypass, that's been going on for quite some time and had some pauses along with some other road projects in the state. So can we talk a little bit about explain a little bit about what's the latest that's going on with DOT funding in general?
So, I'll start off on this, but the first thing I want to make clear is DOT is very strong financially today. A couple of years ago, there were some discussions about our cash balances with DOT for various reasons, such as, the various storms. We were just talking about that earlier today. The last 4 years, we've gone through 4 major hurricanes, starting with Matthew, Florence, Dorian, and Isaias. But anyway, since then, DOT cash balances, when I checked it this morning, it was around $1.9 billion. We like to have around 650 million in that cash account, but that just tells you how strong it is today. Now, something that DOT has been doing this past year is being proactive. Everything that you do today that you see cost increases on everything. So DOT started last year. We looked at every single project in that 10-year program. It was over 450 projects. And we actually did new cost estimates on those projects. Because you got to remember that the 10-year program, there can be a project in there up to 10 years before it's let to construction. So we went ahead and did new cost estimates on every one of those projects, and came up with the number that it's over programmed by. And we have different pots of money. I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but there will be challenges on funding all those projects in that 10-year program. But we're not in panic mode, because this is just like anything else. We have plenty of time to work on this. We're looking for solutions, how to bring down those costs, through design and through construction. And we have time to work with our planning organizations such as Mike to figure out those needs.
And so because of that, exactly what you were just explaining, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe explain this a little bit more. So because of that checking of the projected for the cost, there's a pause now on projects in that STIP or that 10-year program. Is that the right way to think of it, or what does that mean?
I wouldn't say there's a pause. So keep in mind, it's a 10-year program. So we know based on our strong cash balances today that the next 12, 24 months lets are pretty safe. So we know the 211 project that I discussed, the Hampstead bypass, everything in the next couple of years are safe because of our existing cash balances. But as you continue to let projects down the road based on the revenues that we receive today, it's eventually going to catch up where we're going to have to start pushing projects out because our revenues are not keeping up with our needs. So like I said, it's a 10-year program. It's that we're having to figure out based on our revenues how to pay for those projects in years 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then, like I said, we have time to figure this out. So like I said, it's not panic mode. It's just being proactive and trying to get a better grasp on all this.
Is it too early to know then if some of those other projects that Mike mentioned, some of the major interchanges works in Wilmington, would those be pushed out then, or is that not known yet?
So right now it's way too early. One of the main initiatives that we just kicked off in the last month, we are taking every one of those projects and we are looking at what we call value engineering and value assessments to see where we can save money. And based on the different various pots of money and what is over programmed, we hope to find those cost savings in doing these additional value engineering looks at each of these projects. So it can be that we find ways to save money and we still have the same project. We just go in there and find ways to reduce the cost so we can maintain that program. If we can't do that, then our last option is to start sliding projects down the road.
And what's behind some of those cost over programmings? Are they temporary situations, like some of the material cost increases we've been seeing?
So, and what you said is
like
exactly
property?
right. I mean, we can go back into individual, but just wood alone in the past year has gone up 100%. Steel is close to the same thing. When you look at, one of our main items that we use is asphalt, and that is petroleum driven. Asphalt is created, from petroleum, and just diesel prices alone have gone up 30% in the last year. So as you start adding that and trying to find the labor to do this type of work, the costs have just gone up dramatically.
Okay, and let's take a second here to talk about the WMPO. Business Journal, we cover a lot of their decisions and their priorities, but I don't want to take it for granted that maybe everyone is familiar about where the WMPO and other planning organizations like them around the state fit into this whole process and fit into what projects DOT decides to move forward with. So Mike, can you just kind of quickly explain to us what the role of the organization is with all this?
Sure. We are a federally designated organization. We're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Wilmington region. We provide transportation planning services for 494 square miles. We serve a population of over 280,000 people. We're not just focused in Wilmington and New Hanover County, but also we reach into Brunswick and Pender counties as well. We have a 13-member board that sets the policy and direction for the organization. We have federal requirements that we have to abide by, but we also work very closely with our member jurisdictions. Those member jurisdictions are the City of Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, Curry Beach, Belleville, Leland, Navassa, Brunswick County, Pender County, and New Hanover County, and with the Department of Transportation and the Cape Fear Public Transportation Authority, as well as others, to enhance transportation infrastructure around this community.
And so then, speaking of the board, that can lead us into a vote they did this summer that was actually very highly watched, and a lot of people were looking at, and that was about the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, which brings up the ongoing issue of what will happen to it in the future. I'm going to let Mike and Chad kind of give the background also of how this came together in their presentations. But essentially in July, the WMPO board voted 7-5 to not continue to explore a proposal that came in from a private firm to do a public-private partnership, replacing the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge with tolling lanes. And you guys are free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of that description. But of course, that caught the attention of a lot of people on both sides of the river, and particularly because of the PPI aspect and the idea of whether or not toll lanes would be an appropriate use, but also bringing this discussion, I think, closer to the forefront about the future of the bridge, which is aging and has been talked about for a while, that it will need to be addressed at some point. So I'm gonna kind of just to whittle that down a little bit. Mike, can you kind of explain what WMPO's board's role was in that decision and what happens next now?
Sure. So the Department of Transportation did receive an unsolicited proposal for a potential public-private partnership to replace the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge as a potential toll facility. Per the department's policy, they would want our organization to weigh in on a potential toll facility. This is not dissimilar to what they've done across the state. In Raleigh, when there was a proposal to toll 540, the department asked for the capital area MPO to weigh in. When there was a proposal to toll and add the additional lanes on I-77, the department asked the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization to weigh in on that proposal. And so when the department received the unsolicited proposal to replace the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, they came to our board to get feedback, and the board voted 7-5 to reject that proposal and to not move forward with looking at the replacement of the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge as a potential toll facility.
Okay, and Chad, then maybe it's good then to check in with you to say, so if that particular proposal is blocked, or I guess not being discussed now, so now what happens?
So we will continue to pursue it like we would traditionally. And like Mike said, the public-private partnership was just a policy, and it's also, it goes back to the general statute, as a possibility that what could occur. But we will continue every time we go through a prioritization process, which is every 2 to 3 years. We will continue to put that in that and see if it will get picked up. It was submitted a couple years ago in prioritization 5.0. It was not picked up for funding, but we will continue to do that every 2 years. and try to secure that funding. So we will continue to go down that route of traditional ways of funding our projects. The other main thing about it, the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, one thing I want to make clear, it's perfectly safe today. We will continue to maintain that bridge and continue to do our rehab projects as necessary to keep that operational.
Yeah, so when we're saying the needs for the bridge and that it's aging, like what specifically are the needs for the bridge? When you're talking long-term, what are you looking at in terms of how much it would cost to continue to maintain or to replace?
So basically our maintenance costs on average on a given year run about $500,000 a year just for basic maintenance and for the operators to run it, the bridge tenders out there. We know for a fact that we have to do major rehab on the movable span about every 10 years. That's any part of the structure that actually moves. We know we have to do major rehab on the fixed portion of it. That's the sections that do not move. The last one we just finished up a couple of years ago, that was around $15 million for that rehab. So, we're at the point, and this is why the discussion has started on replacing the bridge. Our maintenance costs are getting to the point where it's time to start preparing, how do we replace this bridge? And, our process, like we've talked about at the start, is a 10-year process. Just because something gets funded doesn't mean it gets built next year. So that's the reason why we're early discussing replacing this bridge.
Well, Vicki, if I might add too, a major project like this takes time. I mean, if you look across the state and even in our region, some of our major projects and the timeframes that it takes to complete these projects, it's important to start planning early, or recognizing that it is going to take some time to get these projects funded and then under construction and ultimately completed.
And let's talk about like one potential source of funding. Last week, the U.S. Senate approved the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. And I know obviously it's very preliminary, but I don't know what kind of discussions have been happening at the state and local level in terms of, let's see, $110 billion nationally for roads, bridges, and other projects, to $25 billion for airports. Is there a potential for that money to come and be used to address some of these shortfalls that we were talking about, or bridges like the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge? What have you guys been tracking on that?
So for us at NCDOT, any money that NCDOT may receive, the state of North Carolina receives for transportation, it will go into that bucket for our state transportation improvement program. So if you get X amount of dollars, and let's say we're over programmed by $200 and you get $100, then that will offset, that over programming by $100. So it's everything for us has to go back into our 10-year program.
Mike,
So
what are your thoughts?
It doesn't pick out a specific project.
Sure. And Mike, what are your thoughts on the transportation or the infrastructure bill?
Well, obviously, what we're hearing is that it would provide an additional $1.5 billion to the state over the next 5 years. And so for highways. And so obviously that is something that we would support. The devil's in the details as to how those funds are allocated. And as Chad mentioned, they've got to go through the strategic transportation investment formula and prioritized. And so, we'll see the outcome of that if it ultimately passes, which I think we should know by the end of the month.
All right, great. And we'll keep an eye on that as well and continue to monitor that for our coverage along with these other state and local transportation issues for the future. I know people in this town love to talk traffic, so I appreciate both of you spending some time with us today to give us an update on these and the state and the local initiatives. Thank all of you for joining and watching. We'll have a recap of this in our afternoon newsletter email. And then also next week's Biz Talk, same time, Thursday at noon, we'll be talking about the Blue Economy Initiative that has come out of a local group's efforts with some connections to UNCW, and whether people are going to push initiatives forward that can kind of leverage the coastal economic activities and research and make that something that the area leverages. So stay tuned for that next week. It'll also be part of the coverage in the new Wilmington Biz magazine issue that subscribers should be getting in the mail any day now. You'll see information on that. And if you want to catch up on any of our other recent podcast topics, you can find the Wilmington Biz Talk on your favorite streaming platform. But to everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.